Hello, Jared. Thanks for being here today at Webcam Live. So I attended your great talk today, and it was a real pleasure. You talked about the UX experience and how it will insert now into the mobile context. And there are actually a few elements that I would really like to have you shared with the people who haven't had a chance to attend. Maybe the first one would be what you mentioned about the CAN model in between the basic expectation and the satisfaction scale.
So the Kano model is, interestingly enough, it's an old behavioral economics model that was invented years ago by a Japanese economist. It was never intended to talk about user experience, but it turns out that it's very useful when we're talking about how we make investments in user experience. And basically it maps the investments we make against the satisfaction that we get.
Yes.
So the idea is ideally you want to get more satisfaction from your customers. You want to be able to understand how much investment that's going to take.
Sure.
So the idea behind the model is to just look at those things, and it turns out that there's two important distinctions that come out of the model.
Yes.
Which is that there are some things that you can invest in that will never get anything more than a neutral satisfaction. For example, when the iPhone 4 came out,
yes,
it had a lot of problems with calls being dropped, and Steve Jobs told people that they weren't holding it right. Yes. But in fact, it upset a lot of people because basically phones need to make calls, and this has been a problem throughout the history of the iPhone. The quality of the calls has been really a problem for a lot of users, and it stops people from buying the phones.
True, because you mentioned this is part of basic expectations.
This is part of,
right?
If you buy a phone, you should be able to make a call. And so that's a basic expectation. So it doesn't matter how wonderful the rest of the phone is. If it can't make calls, it's not going to work. So that's a key piece of it. The other thing on the Kano model are what are called excitement generators. And excitement generators are things that often don't take much investment at all, but can actually return lots of delight. So in a hotel setting, just having your staff be really courteous can delight them. The fact that the web works so easily on an iPhone is very delightful for people. So those things turn out to be very delightful. But the thing that the Kano model tells us is that if you don't have your basic expectations lined up, the things that delight you won't delight you. And so teams fixate on the delighters because theoretically that's what separates them from their competition.
True.
But they have to make sure they get the basic expectations right. And if they're not paying attention to what's happening with their users on a regular basis, they lose that.
Right. So you were saying that the excitement part is really important to have people on their boarding experience, right?
Yes.
Onboarding experience.
Exactly.
Whereas the basic expectations, they would set up the limit of the Kano model
That's right.
that you were mentioning. Great. Thank you so much for all this precision. So I remember also that by the end, as a wrap-up, by the end of your talk, you were mentioning the 3 essential questions that you want people in their teams, in the design teams and development teams to address. And I remember the first one was vision, second one was feedback, and third one was culture. So can you just elaborate a little bit on those?
Right. So give you a little background. For the past 10 or so years,
yes,
we've been studying how people basically create great designs. So we've been looking at teams that do a fabulous job of creating great designs and comparing them to teams that struggle, that work hard but struggle at doing the same thing.
True.
And there are a lot more in the latter category. But as we study both groups and look for the differences and similarities, we looked at several thousand variables, and 3 that sort of bubbled up in our analysis to the very top were these 3 things that we've put into question form, because the questions help us determine whether a team is going to be successful or not, but it also helps us help the team get more successful. So the first question is what we call the vision question. And the vision question is, can everyone on the team be able to talk about what the experience of using the design will be like 5 years from now?
Okay, that's the vision.
And so that question helps us understand. It's not what the actual design will look like 5 years from now, not what the pixels will be, but it's what it will be like to be a user. So if I'm developing applications for a restaurant, how will my experience 5 years as a restaurant customer be different than it is today?
So what it would provide as a function and experience function to the user.
And so usually what you do is you look at the things that are getting in the way of today's experiences, and you pull back on them and you say, okay, what if we fix these? What would the experience be? How would the experience be different? And so you look at that experience. And everybody on the team should be able to answer that question, because they've talked about it so much that everybody knows the answer.
All right.
And so that's a key question.
And it should be one vision, a united vision. It shouldn't be...
Yes, yes. It can change, actually, as time goes on. But everybody needs to be aware of the change. So it needs to be united in that regard.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So the second question is the feedback question. The feedback question, whereas the vision deals with the future, feedback question deals with now. What is the current experience? And basically, I should be able to walk up to everybody on the team and find out that they have spent at least 2 hours in the last 6 weeks watching someone. So has everyone on the team watched someone use your design for 2 hours in the last 6 weeks?
2 hours in the last 6 weeks. I hope everyone heard that one. And you actually mentioned in the conference that you gave that the best teams actually do that 2 hours every 2 weeks, right?
At least 2 hours every 2 weeks. So the key thing there is that they're actually watching people use the design. That way it's current in their thinking, it's current in terms of how they're doing things. Because they're doing it repeatedly, they're seeing the same frustrations come up and over again. So that makes those frustrations be higher priority, particularly ones that are easy to fix. And when you combine that with the vision, which is where you're trying to get to, it helps you set a goal and understand where you're supposed to go, even if you're just taking baby steps. And the final question is what we call the culture question. And the culture question says, in the last 6 weeks, have you celebrated a major design failure?
Okay.
Now, some people misinterpret this, that what I'm saying is that you should encourage people to go out and fail. You don't need to encourage them. They're perfectly capable of doing that all by themselves.
But it's quite unusual, I must admit, as a question.
It is. It is. And,
go ahead.
And the key thing about the culture question is that you're actually taking the time to learn from your mistakes, and you're doing that on a regular basis. And and because you're learning from your mistakes, you're in a place where you can act on them. But it has to be a safe place to learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
So by celebrating failure, you get that learning, and that's what makes it useful and key. The trick to all of this is
the link to risk, right?
Yes, yeah. If you're not doing this, it means that you're averse to risk. And organizations that are averse to risk, they produce crappy results. So if you want to produce great results, you can't avoid risk.
That one was tweeted a lot. I can tell you that.
I'm not surprised. Possibly in French, I'm assuming.
No, in both languages.
Oh, wow, okay.
We try our best in Montreal.
Okay.
So that's a great conclusion to this interview. Is there anything you would like to add, Jared, please, as an element that
No, I just want to know why you weren't here. You were supposed to be here. If you were here, I wouldn't have had to do this, right? You should next time, you have to be here.
All right, everyone. So you heard the cue, but I appreciated that you really accepted this interview today, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Actually,
well, thank you for
so much
inviting me.
Thank you. Have a great day, Jer.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.